I'm Ron Nirenberg, and I support Progress Texas because they support civic leadership that is focused on improving the lives of working families, which we need more of and less of the divisiveness.
It's Tuesday, January 27, 2026, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. We start this morning with the shocking news that apparently a few people within the leadership levels of the MAGA movement have some shred of decency left, or at least they recall what that means sufficiently enough to have begun expressing doubt that attempting to smother an American city with poorly trained and masked shock troopers is perhaps a faulty strategy in the months leading up to a midterm election. Some, but certainly not all. Gabby Birnbaum at the Texas Tribune writes that fresh off his relaxing trip to Laguna Beach, Senator Ted Cruz has joined lame duck Congressman Michael McCall in suggesting an investigation into the actions of the federal immigration officers in Minneapolis who shot and killed VA nurse Alex Preddy on Saturday morning might be warranted. Cruz was making pretty good sense, actually, for a moment there, but did suggest that Americans, especially you out there who worship the Second Amendment like Jesus wrote it, quote, leave your damn gun at home, unquote, if you have any chance of interacting with an officer of the law, which is, of course, every time you leave your house. Governor Greg Abbott almost got to a point of actual decency on this, too, but his comment to a hard right-wing radio hack that Trump needs to, quote, recalibrate his tactics in Minnesota could just as easily be read as a suggestion to escalate ICE's aggression against the citizens of Minneapolis. Again, they're not all suddenly saying Congressman and very likely Republican nominee for Attorney General Chip Roy wants Trump to be ready to fund ICE through 2027, even if Senate Democrats dig in against it in funding negotiations. And again, you gun rights types, Chip Roy says that Alex Preddy is dead because he was carrying a gun, and that it was the right move for those ICE agents to blow him away. Congressman and Senate candidate Wesley Hunt warns against all of this sudden inconvenient humanity seemingly overcoming some of his MAGA colleagues, warning that any cooperation with Democrats would mean that MAGA has, quote, abandoned sovereignty altogether, unquote. Congressman Brandon Gill of Flower Mound warns that even after their street agents set a precedent of killing Americans and asking questions later, the GOP, quote, cannot respond with weak-kneed capitulation or cowardice, unquote, while a softening of tone at the top with Donald Trump, including a call between the dear leader and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz yesterday that both referred to as productive, and the yanking from the scene of immigration boss Gregory Bovino, who couldn't seem to decide whether to cosplay as a Nazi or Napoleon. This is not over by a long shot. Speaking of Bovino and that Nazi thing, let's revisit and reconsider Godwin's law. That's an unwritten rule in political debate that bringing up Hitler or the Nazis constitutes an instant loss of that debate because it violates principles of proportionality. In other words, because Hitler represents the absolute extreme of human evil, comparing any modern policy or politician to the Nazis tends to feel like an intellectual shortcut and suggests that the use of that comparison indicates a deficit of nuanced argument and an over-reliance on shock and hyperbole in an attempt to make a point, thus coming off desperate or lazy rather than insightful. Well, Godwin's law, of course, was dreamed up in an era before the likes of Gregory Bovino, Stephen Miller, and others were splashed across our screens daily. Historian Guy Walters, who has written and edited 9 books on World War II, and I promise you is fully aware of Godwin's law, takes to the pages of The Independent to warn that, quote, the Nazification of ICE shouldn't be underestimated, unquote. Walters writes that the shift towards authoritarianism in 2026 is being driven by what he calls an aesthetic-first strategy, in which the Department of Homeland Security and ICE have been deliberately mirroring 1930s-style propaganda to frame immigration enforcement as a righteous civilizational struggle. They use very specific rhetorical dog whistles like "which way American man" and "one of ours, all of yours." Those are phrases with deep roots in neo-Nazi literature and SS doctrine, in an effort to bring in specifically ideologically hardened recruits who view their own personal missions through the lens of racial defense and replacement theory. This can certainly be tied to the callous manner in which Alex Preddy and Renee Good were shot down almost as an afterthought. Gregory Bovino, whose high and tight haircut and calf-length greatcoats unmistakably evoke the imagery of the Nazis with certain intent, further cements the historic underpinnings of a paramilitary posture prioritizing intimidation and street-level muscle over the traditional law enforcement ethos of to protect and serve. All of this can be seen as part of the formation of a self-selecting army designed to enforce a white ethno-state vision, an attempt to frame state-sponsored violence as both noble and inevitable to those who might be susceptible to such imagery. This is scary stuff, y'all. But back to Texas, and specifically the victims of Trump's new personal domestic army who are being held within our borders. Texas manages the largest immigration detention infrastructure in these United States. With a daily population of just shy of 18,000 people, the largest of these facilities, El Paso's Camp East Montana at Fort Bliss, almost 3,000 detainees there on a given day, and the site of multiple deaths among those detainees just this year. One of those, Cuban migrant Geraldo Lunas Campos, whose family, USA Today says, has filed a petition to perpetuate testimony requesting that migrants who claim to have seen officials of that facility choke Lunas Campos to death remain in the United States as witnesses while the family plans a wrongful death lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. That filing is the subject of a court hearing happening today, this afternoon, in El Paso. The South Texas Family Residential Center at Dilley, just south of San Antonio, is under increasing scrutiny as well. Texas U.S. Reps Jasmine Crockett and Joaquin Castro are set to inspect that facility tomorrow after reports of a recent uprising of immigrant families inside its walls and stories of deplorable conditions, including putrid drinking water, insect-infested food, and more. Congressman Castro tells Texas Public Radio that his office is pressing federal authorities for information about 5-year-old Liam Conejo Ramos and urging ICE to release him. This child has been holed up in there for almost a week now in a facility that immigration attorney Eric Lee describes as, quote, not a place that you would want to have your child be for even 15 minutes, unquote. Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy attempted a similar inspection of the Dilley Detention Center recently and was denied access, which he calls an obstruction of congressional oversight. We look forward to hearing about what Crockett and Castro experienced there. At this point, we're all looking for a way to take action, and in 2 parts of Texas, we get to go vote. Early voting is underway in both Tarrant County's State Senate District 9 and Houston's Congressional District 18, but the freeze has had an effect on early voting in both cases. In Houston CD18, which has gone without representation in the U.S. House since the death of Congressman Sylvester Turner back in March of 2025, voters face a choice between Democrats Amanda Edwards and Christian Menifee. KHOU-TV says early voting for the CD18 runoff is back on the calendar for Wednesday and Thursday after a Harris County judge ordered the county to make up for time lost to the winter storm that shut down polling places on Sunday and Monday. Again, CD18, you can early vote now through Thursday. In Tarrant County, veteran union leader and Democrat Taylor Ramette faces MAGA darling and Patriot Mobile technocrat Lee Wamsgans to fill a vacant state Senate seat held for decades by Republicans, a major flip opportunity. Rachel Royster at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram says polling locations in Tarrant County are scheduled to be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. today, and that there's a possibility of an extension of early voting over the next couple of days, but that the Tarrant County Democratic Party has decided not to press that because of the potential for certain votes to be counted or not at the behest of the Republican-dominated Tarrant County Commissioners Court. Election day for both of these runoffs is Saturday, January 31st, a special election runoff in a midterm year in the middle of bad weather. Very likely to see very low turnout, which means your vote carries massive weight. Get out there and get it done. For the rest of us, the March primary looms, and now's the time to confirm your registration. You have less than a week to get that done. Deadline for registration to vote in the primary this March is next Monday, February the 2nd. Early voting in the primary starts on February 17th. See the show notes for a Texas 2026 March primary ballot form from the Texas Tribune you can use with your home address to see who will be on the ballot in the primary in which you choose to vote. By the way, if you're planning to vote by mail, the U.S. Postal Service has been clear that they may not postmark a piece of mail on the same day it's dropped off to them. The later you wait to send in your ballot, the more likely it is to be rejected. Get that done ASAP. Our mission at Progress Texas is to improve and save Texans' lives by acting on our shared bold progressive values, and that starts with countering the billionaire and corporate-funded disinformation machine. While we enjoy the support of hundreds of partners, chances are that you, dear listener, haven't joined the team yet. So if you're a regular, let's get you on board right now. Huge thanks to monthly supporters Mark Melton, Dennis Gilmore, and Deborah Zaloaga. We appreciate all of you very much. Join the team now at ProgressTexas.org. While you're at the website, hit our web store, live and ready for you to grab some newly released Humans Against Abbott, Y'all Means All, and Revolution shirts, stickers, and buttons right now well. Hit the web store at progresstexas.org to support your favorite podcast network today. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Tuesday, January 27th, 2026. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Progress Texas is an independent nonprofit rapid response media organization. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media in action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. We'll see you again tomorrow morning.